The strange thing about being hated by an entire city is that nobody ever asks if the story is true. The first person recognized me outside a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember it because I was standing in the frozen food aisle, trying to decide whether I could justify spending $6 on a box of chicken pot pies, when my phone started vibrating for the 43rd time that day. I ignored it. By then, I had learned that every notification carried the same thing. Another accusation. Another insult. Another stranger convinced they knew exactly who I was. When I stepped outside, the October wind cut through my coat and sent a swirl of dry leaves across the parking lot. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and headed toward my aging Honda Civic. I was halfway there when I heard a woman whisper my name. Not the way friends say your name. Not the way family says your name. The way people say the name of someone they think they already hate. That's her. My stomach dropped. Two women stood near a pickup truck. One pointed her phone in my direction. The other stared openly. Neither tried to hide it. I lowered my eyes and kept walking. Faster now. My keys rattled in my trembling hand. How can you even show your face? One of them called out. I froze for half a second. Just long enough for the words to find their target. Then I kept moving. Because what was I supposed to do? Explain myself? Tell them the truth? The truth didn't matter anymore. Not after 72 hours. Not after one video. Not after millions of views. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly I missed the lock button twice. The parking lot suddenly felt too open. Too exposed. Like every passing stranger already knew my name. Knew my face. Knew the version of me the internet had created. I climbed inside and locked the doors immediately. My chest tightened. My breathing became shallow. The steering wheel blurred as tears filled my eyes. I blinked them away before they could fall. I had cried enough already. More than enough. The phone buzzed again in the cup holder. Another notification. Another headline. Another person who had never met me deciding what kind of woman I was. 3 days earlier, I had been Emily Carter. 27 years old. Elementary school teacher. Lover of cheap coffee and used bookstores. The kind of person who apologized when someone else bumped into me. Now I was something else. A villain. A headline. A target. I stared through the windshield as clouds rolled across the gray afternoon sky. Across the parking lot, people moved normally. Pushing carts. Loading groceries. Laughing. Living their lives. Meanwhile, mine had stopped. It felt impossible that the world could continue spinning while everything inside me had collapsed. I started the engine and pulled out of the space. At the first red light, I checked my rearview mirror. A black SUV sat 3 cars behind me. Nothing unusual about that. Except it had been there when I left the school district office an hour earlier. And before that, outside my apartment building. I told myself I was imagining things. Stress does that. Fear does that. It turns ordinary shadows into monsters. The light turned green. Traffic moved. The SUV moved too. I drove another mile. It stayed there. 2 miles. Still there. My pulse quickened. By the time I reached downtown, rain had begun tapping softly against my windshield. Street lights reflected off the wet pavement in streaks of gold and silver. The SUV remained behind me. Not close enough to threaten. Not far enough to ignore. Then, as I stopped at another light, I looked into my mirror and saw him for the first time. A man sitting in the back seat. Dark suit. Silver watch. Watching the road ahead with complete calm while the rest of my world burned around me. And somehow, in that moment, I had the terrifying feeling that he already knew exactly who I was. The black SUV followed me all the way home. Maybe followed was the wrong word. It never sped up. Never tried to get closer. It simply remained there like a shadow that refused to disappear. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, the rain had become steady, turning the pavement into a mirror of blurred headlights and trembling reflections. I parked beneath a flickering lamp and sat motionless with both hands gripping the steering wheel. The SUV stopped across the street. Not directly behind me. Not close enough to feel threatening. Just close enough to be noticed. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Then again. I looked down at the screen and immediately wished I had not. Thousands of comments. Hundreds of messages. Complete strangers telling me what kind of person I was. Some sounded angry. Some sounded disappointed. Somehow the disappointed ones hurt more. I switched the phone off and dropped it into my purse. Silence rushed into the car. For a moment I simply listened to the rain tapping against the roof. 3 days earlier, my biggest concern had been preparing lesson plans for a second-grade reading assessment. I had spent Sunday afternoon cutting construction paper stars for a classroom reward board. My students had argued over crayons and stickers. One little boy had proudly read an entire page without stumbling over a single word. That had been my world. Small victories. Small problems. A life that made sense. Now reporters were calling my principal. Parents were demanding answers. Neighbors avoided eye contact whenever I walked past. It felt as though someone had stolen my face and attached it to a stranger. I climbed out of the car and hurried toward my building. The cold rain soaked through my coat almost instantly. The elevator smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. Normally I would have smiled at Mrs. Peterson from the 3rd floor if I saw her collecting her mail. Tonight I prayed nobody would be there. Nobody was. I reached my apartment and locked the door behind me. Then I locked it again. And once more for good measure. The silence inside felt heavier than usual. My tiny apartment had always been comforting. Bookshelves. Framed photographs. A collection of mismatched coffee mugs. Tonight it felt unfamiliar. Like I was visiting someone else's life. I walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. There was half a carton of milk, leftover pasta, and a container of strawberries I had forgotten about. Normal things. Evidence that only a few days ago I had been living normally. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. Then came the knock. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just 3 calm taps against the door. My entire body stiffened. Another knock followed. My pulse hammered inside my ears. Nobody visited me anymore. Not since the video. Not since the accusations started spreading online. Slowly, I stepped toward the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Except for a single envelope resting neatly on the welcome mat. No name. No stamp. No return address. Just a cream-colored envelope lying there as if it had appeared from nowhere. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door and picked it up. Inside was a single card. 7 words printed in elegant black letters. You are not as alone as you think. Beneath the message was a small silver emblem. An unfamiliar crest. And somehow, the moment I saw it, I knew it had something to do with the man in the black SUV. I must have read the card a dozen times that night. The message never changed. Neither did the uneasy feeling sitting in the center of my chest. You are not as alone as you think. It was not a threat. At least it did not feel like one. But it was not comforting either. It felt like someone had stepped into the edges of my collapsing world and wanted me to know they were watching. I placed the card on my kitchen table beside a cold cup of tea and stared at the silver crest. It looked expensive. Old. Deliberate. The kind of symbol that belonged to people with influence and history. People who never had to worry about overdue utility bills or grocery budgets. People nothing like me. Sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw headlines. Comment sections. Faces. By 3 in the morning, I gave up and opened my laptop. That was a mistake. The video was everywhere. News sites. Social media pages. Local blogs. National blogs. Millions of people discussing a woman they had never met. A woman who happened to be me. I clicked on one article and immediately regretted it. The comments scrolled endlessly. Some demanded I lose my teaching license. Others questioned my character. Some invented details that had never happened. The strangest part was how quickly fiction became fact once enough people repeated it. I closed the screen and pushed the laptop away. My reflection stared back from the dark window above the sink. Pale face. Tired eyes. A stranger wearing my features. Morning arrived gray and cold. Rain still clung to the city. I dressed carefully and left for a meeting with the school district. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. Outside, people avoided looking directly at me. One man recognized me immediately and lowered his gaze as though he had already reached a verdict. The district office occupied the 6th floor of a modern glass building downtown. 6 months ago I had received an award there for classroom excellence. Today security checked my identification twice before allowing me inside. The conference room felt colder than the weather outside. 3 administrators sat across from me. Their expressions were polite. Professional. Uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to be there. Least of all me. They spoke carefully. Chose every word with caution. An investigation was ongoing. Public concerns had been raised. They needed time to review the situation. Temporary leave would be necessary. Temporary. Such a harmless word. Yet it felt like watching another piece of my life disappear. I nodded because arguing would not change anything. When the meeting ended, I walked out carrying a folder I never opened. The elevator door slid shut. I was alone for exactly 10 seconds before a voice interrupted the silence. Miss Carter. I looked up. A man stood near the back corner. Mid-40s. Dark suit. Calm eyes. The kind of person who seemed entirely comfortable in every room. I think you dropped this. He handed me a cream-colored envelope. My pulse immediately quickened. It looked identical to the one from the night before. Before I could ask a question, the elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. The man stepped out and disappeared into the crowd. I stood frozen beneath the fluorescent lights. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a single card. 4 words this time. He knows the truth. He knows the truth. I read the words 3 times before the meaning settled into place. Then I read them 3 more times because I could not stop myself. The lobby around me buzzed with ordinary life. Phones ringing. Elevators opening. People discussing meetings and deadlines. Yet those 4 words drowned everything else out. He knows the truth. Not they. Not someone. He. A specific person. Someone who apparently knew something the rest of the world did not. I slipped the card back into the envelope and hurried outside. The cold air struck my face immediately. Dark clouds hung low over the city skyline. Cars crawled through wet streets while pedestrians hurried beneath umbrellas. Everything looked normal. That was the strange part. The world never looked different when your life was falling apart. I reached my car and locked the doors behind me. Then I placed both envelopes on the passenger seat. Same paper. Same handwriting. Same silver crest. Whoever was sending these messages wanted me to notice the connection. The question was why. My phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead I glanced at the screen and froze. The call was from Sarah Mitchell. My best friend. Or at least she had been before all of this started. We had not spoken in 2 days. 2 very long days. I answered immediately. Sarah? Silence greeted me for a moment. Then a shaky breath. Emily, I am sorry. My throat tightened. For what? Another pause. For not calling sooner. I closed my eyes. Somehow those words hurt more than the headlines. More than the comments. Because they confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. Even the people who cared about me had hesitated. Do you believe them? I asked quietly. Sarah did not answer right away. The silence told me everything. I did not know what to believe, she admitted. But I know you. And none of this feels right. I stared through the rain-speckled windshield. For the first time in days, someone had said exactly what I had been thinking. None of this felt right. The story spreading online moved too fast. The outrage arrived too quickly. The details changed constantly, yet somehow the accusations only grew stronger. Someone wants this, I whispered. Someone wanted people to see that video. Sarah lowered her voice. Emily, there is something else. My grip tightened around the phone. What? A parent called the school board meeting yesterday. My pulse quickened. Which parent? Gregory Langford. The name hit me immediately. Wealthy developer. Major donor. Influential enough that half the city treated his opinions like facts. I remembered him from school events. Expensive suits. Perfect smile. The kind of man who never seemed surprised by anything. What did he say? I asked. He pushed harder than anyone for your suspension. Rain drummed softly against the roof of my car. Something cold settled inside me. Because suddenly I remembered another meeting 6 months earlier. A disagreement. A complaint. A very unhappy conversation involving Gregory Langford and a decision I had made regarding his son. At the time it had seemed minor. Forgettable. Now I was no longer so sure. And somewhere across the city, a man I had never met apparently knew the truth. The memory followed me all the way home. Gregory Langford. Even saying his name in my head made something tighten inside my chest. 6 months earlier, he had stood in my classroom wearing a tailored navy suit and an expression that suggested he was accustomed to getting whatever he wanted. His son, Ethan, had been one of my students. Bright. Charismatic. Popular. The kind of child adults praised and other children followed. But Ethan had also crossed a line. Repeatedly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would ever make headlines. Just a pattern of behavior that slowly chipped away at another student's confidence. Excluding him. Mocking him. Encouraging others to do the same. I had documented everything carefully. Meeting notes. Parent communications. Classroom observations. The way teachers are trained to do. When I finally recommended disciplinary action, Gregory Langford had not appreciated it. He arrived at the school the following morning demanding answers. I still remembered his smile. Calm. Controlled. Almost friendly. Which somehow made it worse. My son is a good boy, he had said. I am sure there has been some misunderstanding. I explained the situation. Presented the evidence. Maintained my professionalism. He listened quietly until I finished. Then his eyes changed. Not dramatically. Just enough for me to notice. You are making a mistake, Miss Carter, he said. At the time, I assumed he meant I was misjudging his son. Now I wondered if he had meant something else entirely. The rain continued falling outside my apartment windows as evening settled across the city. I sat at the kitchen table with the 2 envelopes in front of me. The silver crest seemed to stare back at me. Questions kept multiplying. Who was sending them? How did they know what was happening? And who exactly was this mysterious man who supposedly knew the truth? My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email notification. Another parent had withdrawn a child from my classroom. Even though I was already on leave. even though no investigation had concluded. The decision had already been made. I closed the message without reading the rest. 5 minutes later another notification appeared. Then another. A local sponsor had cancelled a literacy fundraiser I helped organize every year. My name had quietly disappeared from promotional materials. Piece by piece, my life was being erased. By 9 o'clock, exhaustion settled over me like a heavy blanket. I walked to the window and looked down at the street below. Traffic lights reflected off wet pavement. A few pedestrians hurried through the drizzle. Then I noticed it. The black SUV. Parked across the street beneath a row of maple trees. Exactly where it had been the night before. My pulse quickened immediately. It remained motionless. Patient. Waiting. Almost as if whoever sat inside already knew I was watching. Then, slowly, the rear passenger door opened. A tall man stepped onto the sidewalk. Dark overcoat. Broad shoulders. Confident posture. Even from 4 stories up, something about him commanded attention. He paused beneath the glow of a street lamp and looked directly toward my building. Toward my window. Toward me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I had the unmistakable feeling that the man behind the envelopes had finally decided to reveal himself. My first instinct was to step away from the window. My second was to keep staring. The man remained beneath the street lamp while rain drifted through the pale circle of light above him. He did not wave. Did not signal. Did not make any effort to get my attention. He simply stood there with the patience of someone who had never spent a day in his life being ignored. I should have been frightened. Maybe I was. But curiosity had become stronger than fear. Fear had exhausted me. Fear had followed me through every headline, every message, every accusing stare. Curiosity was new. Curiosity offered the possibility of answers. I grabbed my coat before I could change my mind. The elevator seemed slower than ever. Every floor felt like an eternity. By the time I reached the lobby, my pulse was racing. The glass entrance doors reflected my nervous expression back at me. Outside, the cold air smelled of rain and wet pavement. The street was quieter than usual. Most people had already gone home. I crossed the sidewalk carefully, never taking my eyes off the man waiting beneath the light. Up close, he looked older than I expected. Mid-30s, perhaps. Dark hair. Strong features. A charcoal overcoat that fit perfectly. The kind of clothing that seemed designed specifically for him. Everything about him suggested confidence without effort. Wealth without display. Power without explanation. His eyes settled on me calmly. Green. Sharp. Observant. The sort of eyes that noticed things other people missed. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he nodded slightly. Miss Carter. Hearing my name from a stranger should have unsettled me. Instead, I found myself strangely unsurprised. You have been sending the envelopes, I said. His expression did not change. Yes. No denial. No hesitation. Just a simple answer. Why? Rain tapped softly against nearby parked cars. He studied me for a moment before speaking. Because nobody else is telling you the truth. My throat tightened. And you are? A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. Not mocking. Not amused. Almost respectful. I am trying. I folded my arms against the cold. Who are you? Damian Romano. The name meant nothing to me. At least not immediately. But something about the way he said it suggested it should. Do I know you? I asked. No, then why are you involved? His gaze drifted briefly toward the street before returning to mine. Because someone is using you. The words landed harder than I expected. Using me for what? Influence. Leverage. Reputation. He paused. You are not the target, Emily. For a second I forgot to breathe. Then who is? His expression became unreadable. That is what I am trying to confirm. Frustration surged through me. You keep speaking in riddles. Because facts matter. His voice remained calm. And I do not make accusations until I can prove them. I stared at him. Something about that answer felt different from everything I had endured over the past few days. The internet had convicted me without evidence. The city had judged me without questions. Yet this stranger seemed unwilling to assume anything at all. You said somebody knows the truth, I said quietly. Was that you? Damien looked directly into my eyes. Partly. The rain intensified. Traffic hissed along the distant avenue. Somewhere behind us a siren echoed faintly through the city. But all I could focus on was the next sentence he spoke. The video everyone believes is incomplete. The world seemed to go silent after those words. The video everyone believes is incomplete. I stared at Damien, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of cruel joke. There was none. He stood calmly beneath the rain, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, as if he had simply stated that the sky was gray. Meanwhile my heart felt like it had forgotten how to beat properly. Incomplete how? I asked. Damien glanced toward the black SUV parked along the curb. Not here. Every instinct told me to walk away. Smart people did not follow mysterious strangers into luxury vehicles after dark. Smart people did not trust men who appeared out of nowhere claiming to know secrets. But nothing about my life had been normal for days. Besides, Damien had already done something nobody else had bothered to do. He had listened before judging. 10 minutes later, I sat across from him inside a quiet private lounge on the top floor of a downtown office building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Rain streaked the glass while thousands of lights glittered below like scattered stars. The room smelled faintly of coffee and cedar wood. Everything about the place felt expensive without trying to. Damien placed a tablet on the table between us. Watch. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted it. The video began immediately. I recognized it at once. The same clip that had spread across social media. The same clip that had destroyed my reputation. The footage showed me during a school event. A few carefully selected seconds. A conversation taken completely out of context. Expressions frozen at exactly the wrong moment. Words cut short before their meaning could be understood. I hated every frame of it. Damien paused the screen. This is what everyone saw. Then he tapped another file. A second video appeared. The image quality was different. Wider. Longer. My breath caught. I had never seen this version before. The scene continued beyond the point where the viral clip ended. Entire sections were missing from the public version. Conversations. Explanations. Context. The very things that changed everything. I watched in stunned silence. How did you get this? I whispered. Security backup footage. My eyes widened. Then why has nobody released it? Damien's expression darkened slightly. Because somebody worked very hard to make sure it disappeared. A chill ran through me. The room suddenly felt colder. Gregory Langford. It was not a question. Damien held my gaze for several seconds. I cannot prove that yet. Yet. The word mattered. Because it meant he was already investigating. Because it meant he believed there was something worth proving. I looked down at the tablet again. For the first time in days, I felt something unfamiliar pushing through the fear and exhaustion. Hope. Small. Fragile. Dangerous. But hope nonetheless. Damien leaned back in his chair. There is more. My pulse quickened. More? He nodded once. The original upload account that posted the edited video was created 48 hours before it went viral. Rain continued tapping softly against the windows. And the account traces back to someone connected to Gregory Langford's company. For several seconds I could only stare at the screen. An account connected to Gregory Langford's company. The words echoed inside my head while rain continued sliding down the enormous windows behind us. Part of me wanted to celebrate. Another part remained terrified. Because evidence was not the same thing as proof. And hope had become dangerous. Hope meant there was something left to lose. I set the tablet down carefully. If this is true, why has nobody found it? Damien folded his hands together. Because most people stopped looking once they found someone to blame. I hated how accurate that sounded. The city had not wanted answers. The city had wanted certainty. I had become certainty. A convenient villain wrapped inside a 30-second clip. Damien slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were printed documents. Dates. Account registrations. Public records. Names I did not recognize. My eyes moved from page to page. Every detail pointed toward a deliberate effort to amplify the story. Media consultants. Marketing contractors. Social media firms. The kind of machinery usually used to sell products or political campaigns. Not destroy a schoolteacher. This cannot be real, I whispered. Unfortunately, it is. His voice remained calm. Steady. Certain. Someone invested significant money to ensure the story spread as far as possible. I looked up sharply. Because of a disagreement over his son? Damien's expression remained unreadable. Now my stomach tightened. Then why? He stood and walked toward the windows overlooking the city. Thousands of lights stretched across the darkness below. From up here everything looked peaceful. Ordered. Rational. The complete opposite of my life. That is what bothered me from the beginning, Damien said. The reaction was disproportionate. I frowned. Meaning? You embarrassed Gregory Langford 6 months ago. He turned toward me. But powerful people endure embarrassment every day. They do not usually spend enormous resources targeting elementary school teachers. The realization settled slowly. Cold and heavy. He was right. Nothing about this made sense. Not the scale. Not the speed. Not the coordination. I had been focusing on the wrong question. Not why Gregory disliked me. Why he feared me. The thought sounded ridiculous even inside my own head. Yet the moment it appeared, several pieces suddenly fit together. The pressure. The urgency. The effort to silence discussion before facts emerged. Damien returned to the table. My team has been reviewing school records. My pulse quickened. And? A week before the video appeared, a formal complaint was filed regarding a student incident from last spring. I blinked. Ethan. He nodded once. Memory surfaced immediately. Notes. Reports. Witness statements. Conversations with parents. Things I had nearly forgotten. Things buried beneath the chaos of recent days. The complaint disappeared 2 days later, Damien continued. Officially withdrawn. I felt a chill run through me. I never withdrew anything. I know. Silence stretched between us. Then Damien reached into his coat pocket and placed a small flash drive on the table. This arrived anonymously this afternoon. My eyes fixed on the device. What is on it? For the first time since meeting him, Damien looked genuinely concerned. That, he said quietly, is what we are about to find out. The flash drive sat between us like it carried the weight of the entire city. Neither of us touched it for several seconds. Outside, rain continued falling over the skyline while distant headlights moved through the darkness below. I realized my hands were trembling again. Not from fear this time. From anticipation. Damien connected the drive to his laptop without saying a word. The screen flickered. A single folder appeared. No title. No explanation. Just a date. April 14th. My stomach tightened immediately. April 14th was the day of the school incident. The day everything seemed to begin. Damien opened the folder. Dozens of files appeared. Emails. Documents. Internal memos. Security logs. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he clicked the first file. I leaned forward. The email chain looked ordinary at first. School administrators discussing schedules. Parent meetings. Student concerns. Then I saw a familiar name. Gregory Langford. My pulse quickened. The messages continued across several weeks. Most seemed harmless. Until one sentence made my breath catch. We cannot allow this issue to become public. I read it twice. Then 3 times. Damien remained silent beside me. Another email. Another message. More references to concerns involving Ethan. Complaints. Witness statements. Parent discussions. The deeper we looked, the clearer the pattern became. Several people had raised concerns months before I ever became involved. I was not the beginning of the story. I was simply the person who refused to ignore it. My throat felt dry. They knew. Damien nodded once. Yes. Another file opened. This one contained notes from a meeting I had never attended. Several names appeared repeatedly. School board members. Community figures. Local donors. Gregory's influence stretched further than I had realized. Much further. Suddenly my phone vibrated. The sound startled me. I glanced down. Sarah. I answered immediately. Emily. Her voice sounded breathless. Where are you? I frowned. Why? A brief pause followed. Because reporters are outside your apartment building. My stomach dropped. What? Several of them. Her voice lowered. Somebody leaked your address. For a moment the room seemed to tilt slightly. Another piece of my life exposed. Another line crossed. I closed my eyes. Exhaustion washed over me. Deep. Crushing. Endless. Damien watched me carefully. What happened? I explained. His expression hardened slightly. Not anger. Determination. The kind that felt far more dangerous. He reached for his phone and sent a brief message. Less than 10 seconds later, a reply appeared. I stared at him. That was fast. I have people handling it. The answer should have unsettled me. Instead it brought an unfamiliar sense of relief. For days I had been carrying everything alone. Every accusation. Every headline. Every fear. Now someone else was carrying part of the weight. Damien turned back toward the laptop. Another file had finished loading. This one contained a video recording. Different from the others. Longer. Unedited. A school board meeting. Gregory Langford sat near the front row. The timestamp showed 3 weeks before the viral video appeared. Damien pressed play. The room filled with voices. Discussions. Routine agenda items. Then Gregory stood and approached the microphone. I felt my heart begin to pound. Because the very first sentence out of his mouth contained my name. My name echoed through the speakers and every muscle in my body went rigid. The recording quality was not perfect, but it was clear enough. Gregory Langford stood confidently before the school board, hands loosely folded, speaking with the calm certainty of someone accustomed to being heard. I have concerns regarding Miss Emily Carter, he said. The room remained silent. He continued speaking. Not about the incident everyone believed had destroyed me. Not about the video. This meeting had taken place weeks earlier. Instead, he talked about judgment. professional conduct, decision-making. He never accused me directly of anything serious. That was what made it so unsettling. Every sentence was carefully chosen. Every concern sounded reasonable on its own. Yet together they painted a picture of someone untrustworthy. Someone questionable. Someone people should watch closely. I felt sick. He was laying the groundwork, I whispered. Damien nodded. Exactly. We watched the rest of the recording. Gregory never raised his voice. Never appeared angry. He simply planted seeds. Doubt. Suspicion. Questions. Then he sat down and allowed others to draw their own conclusions. The strategy was brilliant. And terrifying. Because once people begin questioning your character, they start interpreting everything through that lens. A misunderstanding becomes evidence. A mistake becomes proof. A rumor becomes truth. When the video ended, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For days I had been trying to understand how everything happened so quickly. Now I finally had part of the answer. It had not happened quickly. It had been building long before I ever realized it. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Sarah. This time there was a photograph attached. Reporters crowded outside my apartment building. Cameras. Microphones. News vans. I closed the image immediately. I could not look at it. You cannot go home tonight, Damien said quietly. I laughed once. The sound carried no humor. That sounds dramatic. It is practical. His voice remained calm. You need rest. Privacy. Time to think. I looked out at the city lights beyond the glass. The idea of returning to my apartment suddenly felt exhausting. Another crowd. Another wave of questions. Another reminder that my life no longer belonged entirely to me. Why are you doing this? I asked softly. Damien was silent for several seconds. Because I know what it feels like when people decide who you are before learning the truth. I turned toward him. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. A brief crack in the calm confidence he always carried. A glimpse of something older. Heavier. Regret perhaps. The moment disappeared almost immediately. Yet I had seen it. You speak from experience. His eyes met mine. Yes. That single word contained more honesty than anything else he had said since we met. The room fell quiet again. Rain continued tracing silver paths down the windows. Somewhere below us the city carried on as if none of this mattered. Then Damien's phone lit up. He glanced at the screen. For the first time all evening, surprise crossed his face. What is it? I asked. He slowly turned the phone toward me. An email had just arrived from an anonymous sender. Attached was a document. And at the top of the document, in bold letters, was a title that made my heart stop. Confidential Settlement Agreement. The word seemed impossible at first. Confidential Settlement Agreement. I stared at the screen while my mind struggled to catch up. Damien opened the attachment slowly. Page after page appeared. Legal language. Signatures. Dates. Corporate letterheads. At first glance it looked like every other document we had reviewed that night. Then I saw the amount. My eyes widened. It was a settlement involving a former employee of Gregory Langford's company. Someone had been paid a substantial sum in exchange for silence. What does this have to do with me? I asked. Damien continued reading. His expression grew more focused with every page. Then he stopped. Look at this. He turned the screen toward me. A name appeared halfway down the document. Melissa Green. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. I searched my memory for several seconds before realization hit me. Melissa Green had served on the school advisory committee. She attended multiple meetings involving student concerns, including the meetings connected to Ethan. My pulse quickened. She was there. Damien nodded. And according to this agreement, she left Langford Development 6 months ago. 6 months. The same period when everything began unraveling. The timing felt too precise to ignore. We kept reading. Buried deep within the document was a clause referencing internal communications and records. Nothing directly incriminating. Nothing dramatic. Yet together it painted a picture of someone desperately trying to control information. My head ached from information overload. Emails. Videos. Documents. Complaints. Anonymous messages. It felt like assembling a 1,000-piece puzzle without knowing what the final image should look like. Damien closed the file and leaned back. This is not enough. Disappointment immediately flooded through me. I thought this was the breakthrough. It is a lead. His voice remained steady. Not proof. The fragile hope I had been carrying all evening began slipping away. I looked toward the rain-covered windows. The city lights seemed farther away now. Blurred. Distant. Untouchable. What if none of this changes anything? I asked quietly. Damien did not answer immediately. People already believe the story. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. Even if we prove the video was manipulated, some people will never care. The truth hurt because it was true. Public opinion rarely moved backward. Once people decided who you were, facts often arrived too late. Damien watched me carefully. You are tired. I laughed softly. That is an understatement. You are also discouraged. That too. For a moment silence settled between us. Then he said something unexpected. When I first met you, I thought I was helping a stranger. I looked at him. And now? His gaze held mine. Calm. Direct. Honest. Now I think somebody chose the wrong person to underestimate. The words caught me off guard. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were sincere. Nobody had spoken to me like that in days. Maybe weeks. The city saw a headline. The internet saw a target. Damien saw something else entirely. Before I could respond, another notification appeared on his laptop. A new email. Different sender. Different address. No message. Only an attachment. Damien opened it. A single photograph filled the screen. The image showed Gregory Langford standing outside a restaurant. Beside him stood Melissa Green. The timestamp was from 3 nights before the viral video appeared. And in Gregory's hand was a folder identical to the one containing the settlement agreement. The photograph changed everything. Not because it proved the entire truth. Because it connected people who had spent months pretending they had nothing to do with one another. I stared at the image while Damien enlarged it on the screen. Gregory Langford stood near the entrance of an upscale restaurant downtown. Melissa Green stood beside him. Both appeared relaxed. Familiar. Comfortable. The timestamp glowed clearly in the corner. 3 days before the video appeared online. 3 days before my life began collapsing. This was not a coincidence, I whispered. Damien nodded slowly. No. It was not. For the first time since this nightmare started, the pieces were beginning to fit together. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough to reveal the outline of something larger. Gregory had been preparing long before the public ever saw that video. The school board meeting. The complaints. The anonymous accounts. The media pressure. None of it happened by accident. My phone vibrated on the table. Then vibrated again. And again. Notifications flooded the screen faster than I could read them. Damien frowned. What happened? I unlocked the phone. My eyes widened instantly. A local news station had published a new article. Then another outlet. Then another. The headlines all carried the same shocking update. New evidence raises questions about viral school controversy. My pulse accelerated. Someone leaked something. Damien took the phone and scanned the articles. Not someone, he said quietly. Several people. Within minutes more reports appeared. Journalists were asking questions publicly. Legal analysts were discussing inconsistencies. Reporters who had once repeated accusations were suddenly demanding clarification. The shift felt surreal. For days the entire city had moved in one direction. Now it was beginning to turn. Slowly. Carefully. But unmistakably. I sat back and stared at the rain beyond the glass. Relief should have come immediately. Instead I felt exhausted. Deeply exhausted. Because the damage had already happened. My reputation had not disappeared overnight. It had been dismantled piece by piece. Even if the truth emerged tomorrow, those days would still exist. Those headlines would still exist. The loneliness would still exist. Damien seemed to understand without me saying a word. You do not have to forgive them, he said. I looked at him. Who? The people who rushed to judge you. Silence settled between us. The city lights reflected softly in the windows. I do not know if I can, I admitted. You do not need to decide tonight. His voice remained calm. Steady. The kind of voice that never demanded anything. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then another notification appeared on Damien's laptop. An incoming message from one of his investigators. He opened it immediately. The report was brief. Only 2 sentences. Yet those 2 sentences made my heart pound harder than anything else that evening. Melissa Green had agreed to speak. And according to the investigator, she was willing to provide sworn testimony explaining exactly how the campaign against me had begun. The truth came out on a Thursday morning. Not with fireworks. Not with dramatic speeches. Just facts. Simple facts that had been buried beneath noise for far too long. Melissa Green's testimony was released alongside the original footage, internal communications, and records that investigators had spent days verifying. By noon, every major local outlet carried the same story. The narrative that had destroyed me was collapsing under its own weight. Reporters who once questioned my character now questioned the people who had helped spread the accusations. Analysts discussed manipulation. Editorials discussed responsibility. The city that had judged me suddenly discovered the value of patience. I should have felt victorious. Instead I felt tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. I spent the morning sitting beside the window in Damien's office watching sunlight break through clouds for the first time in days. The storm had finally passed. Outside, traffic moved through streets washed clean by rain. Inside, my phone would not stop ringing. Apologies. Interview requests. Messages from people who had vanished when things became difficult. Some sounded sincere. Others sounded relieved to be standing on the correct side of the story again. I answered none of them. Around noon, the school district released an official statement. The investigation had concluded. I was fully cleared. Every allegation connected to the viral video had been discredited. My position would be restored immediately if I chose to return. I stared at the announcement for a long time. Then I quietly set the phone down. Damien stood near the window across the room. How do you feel? He asked. I considered the question carefully. Free. The answer surprised even me. Because freedom was not the same as happiness. It was not revenge. It was not vindication. It was simply the absence of fear. For the first time in weeks, I no longer felt hunted by strangers who believed they knew me. Damien nodded slightly. As though he understood exactly what I meant. Maybe he did. The afternoon passed quietly. No investigations. No documents. No anonymous messages. Just silence. Peaceful silence. Eventually I turned toward him. You never told me why you got involved. He smiled faintly. I told you. Someone chose the wrong person to underestimate. I laughed softly. That was not the real reason. For a moment he looked away. The confident businessman. The man who always seemed to know the next move. Suddenly he appeared almost uncertain. The real reason, he said carefully, is that I recognized something in you. I waited. What? His eyes met mine. You kept telling the truth even when it cost you everything. The room fell quiet. Sunlight reflected across the glass behind him. I realized then that he had not only saved my reputation. Somewhere during those long days and sleepless nights, he had begun trusting people again. Believing again. Hoping again. We had rescued each other in different ways. Outside, the city continued moving forward. Inside, for the first time, so did we. And I finally understood something the entire experience had taught me. Lies can travel faster than truth. But truth has something lies never possess. The ability to survive the journey.